we're talking about improv GMing, don't all DMs improv to some extent?
Yeah, I mean, this is a large reason why we tend to GM this way anyway, because, in any given session of a TTRPG, at some point the players are just going to do things you don't expect as the GM, and you're going to have to improv that stuff and come up with it on the fly anyway. We just had a bunch of sessions over our, lifetime of gaming where that was more of the case than not. So it's like, why am I spending hours planning all this out when they're just going to do whatever anyway?
Yeah. I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
And I'm Nerdarchy Dave.
Welcome to
Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds.
All right, so what do we got on the agenda for today, Dave?
So today we've got how to play D&D the Nerdarchy way.
All right, so Dungeons & Dragons is a great role-playing game. So what is the Nerdarchy way of playing? Obviously, if we're here talking about it, improv or reactionary GMing is going to be one of our three staples.
Player agency is a huge cornerstone of how we run our games.
And lastly, combat-like games rounds that out to be the three pillars of how Nerdarchy plays Dungeons & Dragons.
And today we're not going to be talking about all three of those pillars. We're going to just be talking one. We're going to be talking about improv GMing and reactionary GMing and kind of how we do it in our games.
So I guess we might as well throw out a nice general disclaimer here. This style might not work for everyone. It's not going to work for those that want to have all the meticulous details planned and plotted beforehand. So use what works for you at your table.
Yeah, as always, you should prepare as much material as you feel that you need to run your game. But now let's get into what we kind of do.
So let's start off with the beginning. How did this kind of happen? How did we become improv and reactionary gamers?
So there's actually two reasons why we became improv reactionary GMs, and that is necessity and happenstance.
So necessity obviously is going to have to boil down to sometimes the players are going to do something that's completely unexpected. If the players decide, or tell you in advance, we're going to go this way, which has totally happened to me. You show up at the table, everything's plotted and planned for this way, and they're like, you know what? We thought about it in the last 2 minutes while you were upstairs using the facilities, and now we're going to go this way instead. And it's like, what the flip?
And so it's like, now you have to come up with something else to do. Now, happenstance is, I don't know, the real world just gets in the way. You had a busy week, you didn't really have any time to prep, and it's like, now it's game night, and you can either cancel or you can just figure it out on the fly. And I just rather game and figure it out on the fly than not.
Most of the time when you're at the gaming table, you're gaming with people that you want to be friends with, you want to hang out with, and it is far better to be like, you know what, even if this session is not my absolute best because I didn't have as much planned, let's get together, let's do this. And sometimes those sessions turn out to be just as awesome or if not better than what you normally plan.
Yeah, what those things kind of taught us over the years is, like, you don't have to spend hours and hours prepping to have an awesome game. Now, some people might need that to fall back on, but we've been gaming for a long time, and we have a pretty good feel of how we do it. And also, we like to help the players tell the story that they want to play at the table. So, especially if you have a group that really knows what they want to do and they really want to interact with the world, it is a lot easier for this to work.
If the players are going to interact with the world, they're going to interact with each other, conversations are going to happen, and time at the table is going to be eaten up between these conversations. If as a GM you're paying attention to these conversations, you can begin formulating while all of this is going on what those next steps might be. So while player 1 and player 2 are talking about, if we go this kind of plot and plan, you can begin, what kind of encounters, what kind of hazards, what kind of things can I put in that path should they decide to go that way? Well, then player 2 talks to player 3, and they propose another plan. So meanwhile, you begin aligning the next steps of, what if they go that way instead? So it's possible to plan those things literally on the fly as reactionary to what the players are talking about doing.
Yeah, just pull out the threads as they throw them out there and start weaving them back into the game, and it'll make you seem like a genius because they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that we figured this all out. And, this is just what we thought it would be, but actually you're just listening.
All right, so Dave, why don't we start off here by saying, what do we mean by improv?
So improv is anything that you haven't scripted out or written directly from your notes, whether it's the conversation from an NPC or the players decide to, go into the mines of Moria instead of taking the high pass, right? You're like, oh, I didn't plan for this at all. No one goes into the mines of Moria.
Yeah, and improv can be, coming up with the dungeon. It could be coming up with a random encounter. Anything that is not properly prepped and figured out ahead of time falls into that improv category. So, like, as Dave says, DMs are doing this on a regular basis all the time.
Yeah, I mean, your players may get to town and they're supposed to meet someone at the tavern, but the acolyte background player in the group's like, hey, I want to go to the temple first and see if we can get free rooms. And now all of a sudden you're role playing at the temple instead of at the tavern like you planned.
Indeed. We're talking about improv GMing. Don't all DMs improv to some extent?
Yeah, I mean, this is a large reason why we tend to GM this way anyway, because, in any given session of a TTRPG, at some point the players are just going to do things you don't expect as the GM, and you're going to have to improv that stuff and come up with it on the fly anyway. We just had a bunch of sessions over our, lifetime of gaming where that was more of the case than not. So it's like, why am I spending hours planning all this out when they're just going to do whatever anyway?
Improv does boil down to having to come up with things on the spot. And since I don't know of a single group that ever scripts an NPC conversation, I mean, you might put some, intro dialogue and some, I want to make sure this NPC says this, but you can't script a whole back and forth conversation. So conversations are almost always going to be an improv aspect. So why can't improving kind of bubble over and encompass more of what you do as a GM?
So let's also kind of delve into what do we mean by improv GMing.
So how do we typically handle the prep and execution, since we're really, talking about mostly being improv?
Here's the funny thing, right? It's not that you don't work on anything or you don't prep anything. I generally don't prep the session that I'm going to be running. What happens is, I may start off with a couple bullet points, some ideas from the players. We run a session. Then during that session, I take tons of notes. And when, so session 2 generally is spawned off of those notes, right? So it's not that you don't do anything, you don't prepare anything. It changes the emphasis. So my preparation happens during the games that I'm playing, not before, because, nothing has happened yet. I want to tie it all into what the players are doing. So, like I said, I take a lot of notes.
Note taking is absolutely key because it is going to inform those things that come after. So if you're putting things into play and into motion at the gaming table, when the players then are like, oh, well, last session we did this, and like, okay, well, I pull up my notes, I can look at that. Okay, well, based off of that, here is a flow, a direction that those characters might seek to go. So I think that is absolutely key. But we've done sessions where, we showed up at the table with nothing. I've showed up at the table with okay, I don't remember what we did last time. I forgot to take the notes that I normally do. I've got 3 sentences written down or 3 words written down. Let's just see how this works. But if you take the notes while you're playing, or, okay, we're going to wrap here, and then you jot down what you wind up doing, how things ended can kind of inform what the next session starts off as. We've talked about here on the channel, ending on a cliffhanger that almost foretells what could or should happen next. So that means that things are already in plan because through the course of play, you have set something into motion. Maybe you haven't figured it out yet, but maybe you have. Is the next session going to start off with a mystery? Is it going to start off with a combat? Because you have this moment of indecision on the player's side or on the character side, depending upon how you chose to end it. That is going to allow the next steps to already be planned.
I will also say, too, that I tend to spend a lot of time thinking about the game I'm going to run, more so than physically prepping and writing stuff, so that I live with it for a while and think about things that could happen, based off of what's already happened in the campaign.
I would agree with that as well. trying to be a little bit healthier, so I go for like walks and runs, around my neighborhood, fairly often. So like I'll sit there on one of these walks or runs and live in my material to be like, all right, where are things going to go? I know that as a general advice, start with the end in mind is always one of those things. And even if you're going to break your campaign into segments, well, where is this segment of the campaign going to end? And work with that between, where the characters are now and where that's going to be and what things need to be figured out. And you can, at some point in time, sit down and jot those notes down. But to me, that's not always the same as like, oh, let me just sit down and prep it all.
So, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, but, also, are we saying just don't prep anything?
No, like, there are always things that could and should be prepped. If you're looking at, what is it that you're not good at coming up with on the fly? If you've got some kind of fight things set up based off of where they might go, boom. Put some things up. I know Dave is notorious for, I've got 37 tabs open of, D&D Beyond Monsters and what have you. I know I like using random name generators or, language translators so that I can be like, oh, I want to put something in Draconic, so let me do this. I know that there's good just insert random, character strings that you can kind of carve things out of. I have plenty of dice that I use for determine X randomly, be it, race, class, alignment, dungeon maps. There's all kinds of random tools out there that sometimes you're like, you know what? I don't know what this is. Let me roll something. And a couple rolls behind the DM screen, players don't need to know what you're doing. And you've got some key component figured out as to where the things are going from there.
Yeah, you can even do that beforehand and just have lists of names, whether they're NPCs, taverns, blacksmiths, like the things that your players are going to likely encounter. If you know they're going into a city, you might just want to have a list of 3 taverns. You might want to have a list of a blacksmith. Because these are things that come up all the time. The players are like, I want to do this, I want to go there. So even if it's not fleshed out completely, you just have, lists in front of you to pull from. And it makes it really easy. You can generate randomly, like Ted said, or you can just have them ready and be like, all right, circle this name, put that note down. That's now the blacksmith. And, here is the name of it.
I tend to run off of a Google Doc, so you might have a doc of just ideas and things that are prepped. So it's already written out that you could then, oh, I've got my campaign doc and an idea doc. I just copy and, or cut it off of the idea doc, put it into the campaign doc, and then know, oh, well, this blacksmith is now going to be in Gryffindor, or, this blacksmith is now in Dralic, and you just, put that little addendum in, or maybe you put it under a subheading so that okay, well, there it is. You now have done the extra work and put pieces in place where they need to be.
Yeah, I like things that are kind of drag and drop, like whether it's a whole tavern, whether it's the blacksmith. And, I keep saying the same things over and over again, and there's a reason why. Because, having played this game for 20, 30 years, whatever it is at this point.
30 plus.
Those are the things that come up over and over again that you just know somebody's going to want to go do. They're going to want to go shopping. They're going to want to look for a apothecary. They're going to want to look for whatever. They're a wizard. So it's like you can have those things ready and maybe they're not placed, right? So wherever they happen to be, and then you need it, boom, then you place it, then you lock it in.
Yeah, that's just great. It's a easy way to have ideas, and if you've already prepped that stuff, you might have an idea of who that blacksmith or who that apothecary is. I've done. I'm not huge when it comes to voices, but sometimes a certain NPC strikes me and I could make a notation in the prep, or when I slide it over into the campaign, oh, well, this is here, and I use this particular voice so that when you come back to it, you can see that note and be able to apply that voice.
Yeah, so lastly, who is this for? Is this for everybody?
As we kind of said at the beginning, it's not going to be for everybody. If you feel that there's too much pressure, that if you aren't good at, not taking the specific notes or, having those kind of things prepped, but have to then find those notes and put it into place, maybe this isn't for you. If you're the kind of person that wants everything, figured out, what is the world and everything is in its proper and ordered place, then improv is probably not for you. But if you're crunched for time and you like to kind of give the players a little bit, more choice in the matter, then, maybe this is a style that you might want to give a shot at. And if you give it a shot and it's not working, then you can fall back on the other video that we've recently done, talking about the DM break, where you can just give ask the players for 5-10 minutes, get it all figured out and move on from there. But hey, you like this video, others like it, as well as all the awesome content over on nerdarchy.com, why not come check us out on Patreon and support us there?
Articles like how to play D&D for free for the rest of your life.
Or you can head over to that aforementioned nerdarchy.com and buy products like this one. How about Hit Dice to Heroics? Sometimes heroes need to dig deeper and become a little more, well, heroic. From Hit Dice to Heroics is a supplement for 5th edition. There are over 40 options for spending hit dice other than regaining hit points. Players begin tapping into these options as soon as they hit 2nd level. Your character class and sometimes your subclass determine what options might be available to you. Channel your very vitality into arcane or divine might if you're a spellcaster. A barbarian can channel even more of their mighty totem animal. Fighters are inspired to even deadlier skill with their blade. These are just some of the possibilities found within. There are at least 3 new options for each class.
Let us know how you run your games down in the comments below. Share any tips or tricks you have for running on the fly and being a reactionary GM.
If you want to help out Nerdarchy and YouTube, appease that almighty algorithm, go ahead and click that like, share, subscribe, even go ahead and hit that notification bell.
Quick reminder, we drop new videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so come on back. But you can't wait till then. We got you covered. Up here in this card, you can check out why Nerdarchy doesn't run official D&D adventures.
So until next time, stay nerdy.